This session is particularly near and dear to my heart. Prior to joining the World Economic Forum, I was Director of Innovation for the City of New York, and I led our efforts related to smart cities. I remember talking about my work, and I often said I was trying to prevent chaos. Because when I joined the city, we had over 1 million connected devices that were spread out across the city, and the only way that you could actually know what one of those devices was is you'd have to take a picture of it and send it around. You'd send it around to the Department of Transportation, to our various infrastructure agencies, and say, does anybody know what this is, right? And that we were always playing catch-up, trying to figure out how do we capitalize on this opportunity that these technologies provide, while also making sure that we were mitigating the risks, right? Always weighing the pros and the cons of technology and the benefits that it could provide. And I'm really excited about the group of people that we have here today, because I think they can speak to this honestly, right? This is not about just promoting tech for the sake of tech. This is about an urban revolution, changes that have to happen in our cities to make them more sustainable, more resilient, but we can only do so if we're responsible. In 2019, I led an effort at the World Economic Forum together with the government of Japan to create the G20 Global Smart City Alliance. And together, as a network of cities working around the world, we've been advancing global norms for more responsible and ethical use of smart city technologies. Today, you're going to get to hear from a lot of individuals about not only what's being done, but what needs to be done in the days ahead. And security is front and center in the threats that we face, and it's going to be critical to make sure that we can capitalize on these opportunities. Just this week, here in Davos, we released a new report on the state of the connected world. It highlighted cybersecurity as one of the most pressing issues facing technology governance today. Every year when we put out our global risk report, you see cybersecurity again and again highlighted. That said, these are the experts here, and it is my pleasure to welcome them up on the stage. First, a dear friend, someone who I feel believes these issues and has been working on this for many, many years, Mr. Carlo Ratti, who is a professor at MIT and also an architect by trade, who will lead this discussion. Next, we will invite up Joel Mesot, who is the president of ETH here in Switzerland. We have Minister Kubayi, who is the Minister of Human Settlements in South Africa. We have André Kudelski, Chairman and CEO of the Kudelski Group. And last but not least, someone that I'm very happy was able to make it here today, all the way from the City of Kyiv, Ukraine, the CEO, Mr. Oleg Polovynko, and who is again the CIO of Kyiv. Thank you again for joining us. I'd love to invite all of our speakers up to the stage and hand the mic over to Carlo.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you all here, both here in the room and also listening to us, connected to us. So just, first thing, we're talking about smart cities. Well, smart cities is kind of a terrible name. Smart cities, sounds a bit like a city, like a computer in open air. It focuses a bit, I believe, a bit too much on technology and less a bit on the human side of things. Yet, what is happening, what is behind the name is actually a profound revolution happening today. We all know how our lives have been changed over the past 20 or 30 years by the internet, by digital. And what is happening today is actually digital is entering physical space. And that is really what a smart city is the internet, entering the space we live in. It's about sensors, it's about data. Data is the key glue behind the smart city. And data with AI is what is really transforming the way we can understand, design, and ultimately live in our cities. So this is what we'll discuss today, and in particular, all of the questions that this opens up. Jeff already mentioned it. It's about security, it's about privacy, it's about governance, many new questions about how we deal with this new hybrid condition between the digital and the physical world. And just to begin, I want to begin with Professor Mesot from ETH. It was mentioned, ETH, like most universities, our own campus at MIT, the beautiful campus by ETH in Zurich, is like a little city. And it's a city that also can be used like a living lab, a place for experimenting with new technology, and that's what has been happening over the past few years. So, so over to you for the initial fire starter.
I have seen that my microphone is so maybe.
We have a technology issue.
Yeah, high-tech ETH. So first of all, I want to thank you for the invitation and to participate to this panel. I'm myself a physicist, so I'm not really in the field, but of course by leading one of the best universities in the world, I have to deal with this. And let me tell you how I see the issue. I see a city as part of a bigger environment. I see digitalization as a chance to address some of the biggest issues we have currently in the world. And I want to pick up one example, something that is discussed again and again in this WEF year. This is climate change. This is how to deal with the energy crisis. You might know that in Europe, we are in a very difficult situation due to the war ongoing in Ukraine. We are lacking energy resources. And now a city can play here an essential role. And for this, we develop technologies in universities, in the labs. And the main question is, how do we bring these technologies to the market and quickly? We don't have 20 years to wait. We have to do it very quickly. And the concept we have developed at ETH is exactly to use our city, our small city, 35,000 people at ETH, 25,000 students, 10,000 employees, researchers, and we deploy our technologies. Just to give you two examples. One example in the field of energy. So we use part of our campus to store the energy, the heat in summer, and we recuperate this heat in winter. So this helps to unload the electricity grid during the winter, which is a big step towards sustainability. The second aspect I want to mention is what we do in the cybersecurity field, which is essential for the exchange of data. So we have developed a new protocol for exchange of data between point A and B, so that the data doesn't flow somewhere where you don't want to go. And again, we deployed this technology at the level of ETH and the ETH domain. And now it's taken over because CEO comes and see it by the banks in Switzerland, and we hope that it might deploy even in a different field. This said, there are some issues that we need to address. Technology alone is not sufficient. We need to have the acceptance of these technologies by the population. And here during COVID, we have done a very bad experience, if I may say. Together with our sister school in Lausanne, we developed the very first Swiss COVID app that was deployed in the Apple and Google phones, but nobody used it. It was a huge technological advance, but nobody used it. Why? Because there was no trust in the technology that we had developed. So I think we will have to address this point later on. I don't know how much time I have.
I think that is great, John. But and your example is very, very concrete, and so I think we can continue the conversation in a moment. But trust is certainly one important thing of this new hybrid reality, again, between digital and physical world.
Just 2 words: skills. This is the other one that we need to address, and yeah, I will keep the rest for later on.
No, that is great. Well, let's move now to Minister Kubayi. Now we look at the university as a small city, as a living lab, but what if we scale up to an entire country? And so how, in your case, how, as a Minister for Human Settlements, how do you see this? And again, building both the hardware and the software in many, many cities in your country.
No, thank you very much. I think for me is that smart cities, as we say, and how we utilize technology would assist us to interface between human and technology. For example, part of what we've learned during COVID-19 pandemic is that we moved as households in workplace to be online. And if we were having quite a number of our cities, almost like smart cities, having technology, high tech, and all that, would not have people left behind. We are currently piloting one of our areas we've developed in terms of smart city, in terms of ensuring that we can be able to interface and have a broader issue. And I do agree with the last speaker around the issue of privacy, trust, and believe in the technology. One of the things that we have done in South Africa, we've done a research and development around hydrogen fuel cells. As part of the alternative, we've commercialized that from government point of view, and we've given it to the market to be able to run it. And again, on the smart city concept that we have, we brought in a public-private partnership. So it's not driven wholly by government. It's driven by those who want to invest, and it's got almost the issues around, it's a smart city that is component of people who are going to settle, how you design the houses, different from previously in how we have, for example, issues on renewable, clean energy space. Within that smart cities, what we're looking for. We're also looking at the industries or whatever we build as factories and manufacturing within the city. It has to be high tech in terms of also ensuring that it's within the clean component of it. So one of the things that we've got to be able to resolve as the world in terms of what we do with smart cities, because sometimes we confuse, and you find that the conceptualization of it, when you read in other countries, or even how online you'd find, or in terms of material on research, you'd find that there's people will talk about connectivity within the cities instead of the cities being smart, where there's high tech, where it's less in terms of, for example, no carbon emission that would be. So it's what we'd want to see into the future as we build the smart cities from our side. But again, it has to be responded to by financing as well. So the financial institution must buy into the alternative. If you utilize material, you've got to be able to build in terms of different material, which is sustainable within those smart cities as well. So it's not just, for me, it's not just building cities that are connected high tech, but also cities that are resilient in terms of response to what we are dealing with globally.
That is great. So many words are, the same words before about, trust, but also, resilience. And I would say, think less about smart cities and more about smart citizens, about, the people who live there and how their life can change. And by looking at this, Oleg Polovynko is the Chief Digital Officer in Kyiv. And clearly the situation in Kyiv actually brings to the extreme some of the conditions that we can experience in other parts of the world. So any comments from your side of how you've been using over the past few months and you are planning to use some of the new technologies, this kind of new hybrid reality, in order to take action in the face of the harsh reality you're living in?
As you mentioned previously, the trust, we can begin from that trustable resource and trustable information in moment of invasion, it's become crucial for Ukraine government, for city management, because Kyiv in normal life, it's 3.5 million citizens inside the city and 2 million around the city agglomeration. And in March, in city, there was less than 1 million. So evacuation of 2.5 million, it's big task. It's that what we have to solve, and in this moment we have to communicate in trustable way. So first of all, we come back to the basics. We have to internet connection. That's what we need. For example, any kind of imagine you have announced about the missile attack. You have to go to bomb shelters. There is no internet connection in bomb shelters. How do citizens have to understand that he can get out from there? One of the questions what we're trying to solve, how to communicate with people in fast way, in trustable resources. This is one of the point what basic in smart city. Yes, it's communication. For us, war can be limitation, but we change it and it becomes our opportunity. It's chance to implement very fast new solutions for our citizens. And first of all, we start with information about how they can survive in the city. That's is new services which we not mentioned previously. For example, when I plan my disaster recovery plan for Kyiv city services, there was no missile attack. There was no bombing. That was new challenges what we have to solve. And now the main challenge for Kyiv is blackouts. We have to solve how to give the services, how to distribute connection to internet, how to distribute the telecommunication services to the citizens. For example, our telecom operators, they have emergency generators, tens, maybe maximum hundreds, but they have only in Kyiv base station more than 1.5 thousand. And now we need for all of them generators. We don't have it. No, we don't have it. That's why we now collecting all of them. So all of these challenges, they can be for every country, even without the war. As we see the pandemic, the same challenges. The natural disaster, the same challenges. So this is that's world. The heating, yeah, we see a lot of challenges, and they are similar. So we can learn from our experience. We are ready to share it and use it for other cities.
Thank you. Thank you. So basically looking both at the hardware and the software, but really adapting fast. And again, we all have experienced that during COVID about a new threat, unexpected threat. And I think we've been all impressed by how in a different context you've been able to use technology in this very flexible, adaptable, and resilient way. But then let's get then to André Kudelski. André, you run the Kudelski Group. You are some of the world leaders when dealing with data, with private information, large amounts of data. I believe you're also in the Swiss Innovation Agency. I'd like to ask you, after having heard these different views coming from the level of the campus of a whole country, of a difficult situation with unexpected things happening, what is your perspective?
First, I must say that I'm extremely impressed by how the situation has been managed in Kyiv. We know already that in terms of being able to resist in such challenging situation is not something easy. But if I'm coming back to something pretty fundamental, how many cities or places you have blackout or you have some issue without needing to have a war, without needing to have conditions that are really at the limit. And I'm quite impressed to see that not only it's possible to have a system where there is a communication between the official and the citizen, but that is something that is working. Because it's fundamentally a real test to see how resilient is an infrastructure. And what we need to understand is in all what is digital, in smart cities, the first element that is important is to consider it's a critical infrastructure. And the critical infrastructure, you need at least to have a minimum level of service that is, I would use the term of bulletproof. It's maybe not very appropriate in this, panel, but fundamentally an element where even if you have a very strong stress, you have some things that continue to operate. And you must consider that you have different layers. You have the first layer that is really critical infrastructure that needs to be extremely secure, whatever is happening. And you add on top of that elements that can add or comfort or element like, for example, sustainability. And one of the key challenges that we see with sustainability is that it requires real-time decision and real-time communication. And what some people don't understand is that if you have something that is very smart, it's also something that can be more vulnerable to attacks. And if it's more vulnerable, then it may be not so smart at all and be the source of disaster. And that is why adding such feature is requiring at the same time very secure elements to avoid that is something that will not only not work, but create disaster. But on top of that, and I think that in all the elements that are smart in terms of smart cities, we need to look at what can really add value to the citizen, to the user within a city. And we need to add a little bit of dream. I think that it's good to think that we should have the same levels of service everywhere in a country, but I think that there are opportunities to test first in cities, that maybe first sub-part of city, like Joël Mesot have just said that before, but fundamentally to add things that can make people dream in a way that it's not something that you replicate what we have seen in the previous world, but something that give you level of comfort that you have never seen before. But all that must be done in a way that is as intuitive as possible, in a way that you don't look at the technology, you just look at the new features that are enabled through the system.
That is great. Thanks, thanks, André. So let's all start dreaming about smart cities. As André is saying, I'd like to ask some of you actually about, what type of dreams, what type of new application you might think about. But let me add something that actually many times is difficult for cities and city officials to dream. Usually cities follow what is called best practices. And best practice is really the opposite of dreaming and innovation. Best practice means you look at what somebody else has done maybe 10 or 20 years before. It was successful, and you keep on perpetuating that. So you're basically locking the future into the past. Dreaming is really about thinking about new things we can do with this. So maybe, Joël, I'll start with you. What would you dream about in using new tech on the campus, or from the campus taking the technology from your campus into the city?
There is something very interesting that happened during COVID at ETH. A university is a bunch of big egos, professors, sorry, I hope you, I'm one of them, you also. And so each one thinking about, the best science she can do for herself, itself. During COVID, suddenly there was a crazy situation where we locked everybody down and we allowed only the people to work on COVID-related issues. And by the way, I have to mention something. I was in Kyiv in 2020 with our president of the Confederation because we had developed a respirator that is produced in Ukraine. And I visited all what you did. And I was very impressed to see the maturity of the digitalization that you had in Ukraine and in Kyiv in particular. And I think this preparation, this level of maturity is one of the key aspects for the success that you have in defending your country. And I'm not sure we are ready in Switzerland. So back to your question. So for me, the dream that happened at ETH is that suddenly you could collectively bring the forces to work together, and I would say in a coherent way toward a target. And you could feel the energy that was in there. So now, imagine that the city is not just looking at herself, and this is a little bit what we have in every country. Zurich is looking at Zurich, Geneva as Geneva, is not really connecting to the rest of the country. You become, as a city, part of the problem of a bigger geographical area. That would be my dream. And so let me give you an example of how I see the things. If you try to get with your car in Zurich, you will spend hours stuck on the highway and so on. Because there is no coordination between the different ways of reaching Zurich. Train, roads, and other means. And so what we should do is really look at the entire system. For example, there are a lot of trucks going into the city in the morning, And that's part of the problem. Why? Because in Switzerland, you are not allowed to run trucks during the night. And the trains are completely full too. So we are developing with the train organization a concept where we could electrify the trucks. They would be allowed to run during the night, and that would unload the traffic in the city. And then we need to coordinate all the parts. For this, we would need AI. And so those are the kind of things I'm looking at, I'm dreaming of. I mentioned the energy system. So the city is part of a bigger entity and is part of the solution.
That is very, very interesting. You know, it reminds me of what happened during COVID. During COVID, we had to flatten the curve. That was a curve of contagion, but somehow this is flattening the curve of the city, or traffic. So trying to better spread traffic thanks to digital data. Well, I'd like to ask the panel any other wild smart city dreams, but also I'd like to ask the audience as well, because, you know, we'll engage everybody in a moment. And I also want to do like just a small thing about housekeeping. If you like to use social channels, feel free to use hashtag WEF23, as we've been doing in previous session. But any other thoughts? Maybe Mmamoloko.
Yeah, I think for me, one issue that will help us is around urbanization. Because we're seeing, and the predictions obviously are saying that by 2050, 70% of the population will be in urban areas more than in the remote. Now, utilization of how we develop the cities and data collection to be able to replan, redesign, and advance how people are living in the spaces, it's critical, but that will have to be done. I'm going back to the issue of privacy. Because if you're going to have to redesign the cities and have them smart, for example, issues around face recognition to deal with, for some of us in the continent to be able to see how migration assists, you know, it's part of those things that we'll have to deal with. The regulations, the laws around that remains one of the areas that is a gap, it's a challenge for us to grow into the digital space, but also the digital gap. Digital divide that still exists between the rich and the poor, and between the urban areas and the rural areas, becomes part of the challenge that we would want to see going forward as we deal with the issues around smart cities, because you don't want anyone to be left behind. Otherwise, we're creating more and more an unequal world in terms of society.
That is great. So basically, using digital, using technology to make a more inclusive city. Oleg, André, any?
You know, my first point, it's of course responsibility for Russia, for their action. That's what I dream and all of us dream, and peace in our existing territory. But if we come to city, you know, we are from post-Soviet Union country, and we are quite new in democracy. And electronic democracy, it's perfect channel to communicate with citizens and to change the city and change the country. We have several options which we launched this year, the petition, the voting, and all these have to be in trustable way, where you can trust to this voting and you can trust to the platform which make election and make voting, and you have to trust to the people who use any kind of authorization in this platform from electronic democracy. So my dream is to 100% including the people in process of electronic democracy in my city.
And just a quick follow-up, you know, I think, you know, the issue of engagement and bringing people together and feedback from people seems to be crucial here. But before, a few times, trust emerged. So how can you bring that to the table? You know, in terms of trust, what can you do for people to trust digital technology? I mean, we've seen just recently in Brazil how actually the results of the election, digital elections, you know, were not trusted by the population.
I think we have to go step by step. We don't need election in first step. In first step, we have petition, voting for small questions. We have to test technology on small steps, and after that, come to more hard steps.
Sure, that's great. André, you launched, you know, the dream hashtag dream. So, any further thoughts?
I have, if I may have, I don't know. hope it's not working better. So there is technology we can trust, some that we cannot. No, having said that, no, if I may have two dreams. One is, I don't think that in terms of smart city, one size fits all. What is important is to get different level of risk appetite, to have solution that can allow to have something much smarter with a lot of service, but where the people can opt in. But it's important to have at the same time solution for the ones that are not convinced. And I give you a very simple example. If you have a public transportation, you need to have some advanced feature for the one that wants to have something very smart. But at the same time, someone that don't like a mobile phone, he should still, or she should be still able to buy a ticket in a conventional way. So we should not consider that as exclusive, but something where you have different options. And now a second dream is about access to cities. Today, many cities have problem of traffic jam. And here, one of my dreams is to use the smart technology in a way to make that much smoother, in a way that people can live much better within city boundaries. And that is a dream that I may have.
It's great to solving one of the key issues in cities globally. But you had a thought about, still a thought about trust.
Yes. It's good. So what we observe is really a split in society of those who just don't trust any technology anymore. And we see that happening everywhere, including in Switzerland, a growing portion. So that's something that is worrying, that has emerged in the past decade. And so we need to address this point. And that's why at ETH, and with the help of the ETH board, we decided to have one pillar that is the dialogue with the society, at the political, administrative, but also with the society at large. We shouldn't ignore this proportion of the population that is not adhering to this technology. So technology alone will not be sufficient anymore. We need to include the ethical component. We need to include the social component. And so we are moving in that direction. Education will be the key at the end. So we need to address all these issues. And I think at the university level, it's too late. It has to come much, much earlier. And that's really a big effort that we need to do. And if we don't, then there will be always a growing part of the population that just don't believe in what the elite, because we are seen at the elite, is saying. A last point on e-voting. You know, in Switzerland we vote all the time on everything, and so there are projects with the e-voting. The first attempt was not successful. I don't know if you were part of that, André, but we cracked the code ETH, so it delayed all the project. So when it is done, it has to work from day one. If there is one failure, the mistrust will be there again.
Okay, but then I cannot, resist to respond. Yes, we have had one project, but it was not considered as acceptable because it was coming from the private sector, and the Swiss Post have chosen their own solution that they bought in Spain, and that was as reliable as you know. So fundamentally, that's a true story behind the Swiss voting system.
So users, we are in between industry and government. Maybe we can work together.
No, the question is that, and even the company that we have to address this issue, the name was Polyride. So that was quite a nice name.
All right, you know, back now to the main topic and to the main issue. Any other thoughts on this and on trust? You know, but what I heard is about, first of all, about education, is about doing step by step so people get familiar, and then clearly technology itself plays a big role. If something fails, you know, then that's going to it can jeopardize the whole process.
Should we ask?
Yeah, we're going to move to everybody in the room in a second. I'm telling you to ask all of you a quick question, 1 minute each, 1.5 minutes each, and it's about who should come around the table for some of the things we've been discussing, for some of the dreams, some of the solutions. I mean, who are the different actors who need to come together? And that's very important, especially in the context of the forum. You know, we got many people from different industries here in the room, from government, from industry, from academia. So who should, in order to manage, call it the smart city revolution, who should be at the table?
I think we have to include social society, the social partners, and we do too little on this.
Great.
I do agree, social partners, government, business, researchers, but also communities, because you can't develop for community. That's why there would be trust. If they are not part of it, they're not involved, then they will never have trust.
Citizens, that's great. André.
First, I think we need to have an open platform that is allowing to have innovation to happen. Because one of the worst things is to try to design everything by committee, and then we don't have speed and we don't have innovation. So fundamentally, to get one common element that is open architecture, that is allowing to have different innovation initiatives that may be competitive one with each other in a way that people can choose.
That's good. So an open platform, it seems to me this reminds what you were saying about ETH. Somehow, you know, there's two types of hacker. White hat hackers are the people who look at the platform trying to look at vulnerability to make it stronger. And if you open up that platform, more eyes will look at it, and probably there's more trust and more strength and resilience in the system. Oleg.
You know, I think that in history we have a lot of examples when we haven't heard some of category of people or profession or something else. So I agree that we have to have the open platform and can engage anybody who wants to be part of smart city or future.
That is great. So engagement again. And talking about engagement, then is the right time to engage all of you who are here in person. So I already see a hand down there. There's a microphone coming. If you could introduce yourself as well before the question.
Perfect, I will. Hello? Okay. So thanks a lot for this wonderful panel. Thanks, Oleg, for showing us what it means if connectivity is not there anymore. Thanks, André, for pointing out how important it is that this connectivity also is secure and what happens if it's not secure and not trustable. Thanks for Joel for showing us that it's important to collaborate, that we have these test beds at our universities, at ETH, at EPFL, so that we together can find out what it means to operate with sustainable. My name is Daniel Dobosch, I'm a research director of Swisscom, and my question is, what holds us up to start? Thanks a lot, André and Joel, to mention that basically we fight today with traffic jams on our streets. But we should also think about that basically we have to plan ahead, years, because the digital trains, the digital motorways, we have to plan today, the digital infrastructure, so that we don't have data traffic jams in future.
Thanks for the question. I would say, you know, we have all started in a sense, because if you look at the past 5 years or 10 years, a lot of innovations that happened are changing and have changed our lives. But so I would still frame the question about, you know, what next? So what should be the next big challenges ahead? Joel, you wanna start?
So thank you for your question. You know, there are technologies out there that will be deployed, hopefully. I'm talking here about 5G technology, for example. And again, there is this mistrust. So we need to really, and 5G technology will allow to have huge, really fast exchange of information. We are talking gigabyte per second or this kind. Actually, we hired a professor who is working on a 6G technology, so we are ready for the next step. And there is now a worry in many communities in Switzerland that this technology might, you know, be unhealthy for the people. And so we need to address this point, make research on that, and show that this is not the case. And I think in Switzerland we are well prepared. there is the issue of cybersecurity, and here we can do a lot, but at the end, or very often, the mistakes are made by the people. You know, if you get one object that is connected with others and you don't change the password, and of course it's no help to have the best technology in the world. So very often the mistakes are made by humans. And maybe you want to comment on that, André.
I would say yes and no. I would say for computers, that's true. But if you take an elevator and you consider that you make a mistake by pressing on the wrong button and you get a disaster, that may be to say that the technology was not where it should be. So fundamentally, I think in smart cities, we may consider technologies that are secure enough. Now, to the fundamental question, when can we start? One of the ideas to have the panel today was as a starting point, because I think that we have great opportunity to do something to change how cities are smart or not smart. And you cannot arrive before having departed, and the idea of this panel was maybe to send a signal that it's time to wake up. And as our former, how to say, Federal Council Jean-Pascal de la Murat was saying, the Swiss is getting up very early, but waking up late. So that's something where we need to make some progress.
Great, Will. Great. Any further thoughts from the audience? Ideas also that you'd like to share, or other things, or yes. The microphone is coming.
Michael Hengartner, Chairman of the Board of the ETH domain. I'd like to pick up on this buy-in, on this voluntarism that Joel mentioned. I think that's really important. It's really difficult to force people to do things that they won't. And my experience is that within any human system, if you have a small group of volunteers start, then peer pressure or positive experience will bring the others to it. A beautiful example is actually this canton, Graubünden, when cars came onto the scene. People here thought cars were a bad idea. They were loud, they were noisy, they were stinky, they were dangerous. Cars were not allowed to drive in this canton until 1925. Eventually they realized, well, it's okay. Cars appear to be okay, and they allow them to come, right? If we wait till everybody wants to do it, it's okay. So within smart cities, maybe we can get smart quarters or smart neighborhoods. You make a competition within the neighborhoods. Is there a neighborhood that would like to try this? And you start with this neighborhood, and you realize this neighborhood is pretty happy with that. And then you can roll it out far and much further. And I think this idea of competition among the willings might be the best way for a city to test something without generating fear, and quite the opposite, generating almost an envy. So why can't I be the pilot plant, right? In this, and use a little bit more psychology and not only technology when we roll out these new offerings.
This is great. What I like about this is it reminds a bit like, like what happens in natural system, where you try different things, you try mutations, see what works, what doesn't work, and then you scale up. Any other thoughts on this?
No, thank you very much. I think the idea of it's almost like piloting, but getting the communities to be part. Because many people will believe in what they see. Most of the people will fear what they don't know. What is foreign to them, what is unknown, it's fear. And technology has its own weaknesses, and people would tend to fear, especially myth around technologies, tend to move quite faster than anything else. And once you deal with that, you are able to get a buy-in. And I think the most difficult, what we are doing in South Africa, for example, we're developing a new smart city. So it's whole lot development. So you're making people want to live in there. For example, that's why I made a comment to say, what we are doing, we are linking the technology with almost like clean environment. So the incentive is that you'd be in that area, you'd cycle, you'd walk. It's more there's incentives for somebody wanting to live in that environment. So it's an incentive so that once we move move out of that, then you are able to go to existing cities to say, look at that city, that is how it's living. We'll want to convert it into where you are so that you start being part of it. And that's what I think, that's why I'm supporting the initiative in how you could do smart counties, you could do streets, neighborhoods, and therefore that becomes an incentive to population. Thanks.
Thank you, Mmamoloko. And Oleg, what about you, I see?
Yep. When you mentioned about the car, I remember the red flag. You know, in England, there was 30 years maybe before 1924, there was red flags before the car, the people walking before the car with red flag to show that the car will come. So now it's in England so that was the story. And now we are very fast world. The speed is in increased maximum. Yeah, and it's hard to imagine which technology in 10 years we will be discussing here. It will be AI or something else. I cannot imagine. So we have to be ready for future-ready world. And I think that we have to focus on values, and values of security, values of nature. And for example, my country now fighting for values of civilized world. And this is why I'm thankful to all civilized world for support. And let's focus on values, and we choose technology in that moment when we need it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. They said it's good to, as we get closer to a conclusion, but André, you want to add something to that?
Yes, just one very important value is choice. And one of the beauty that in smart cities, important parts is something that is virtual, and then you can offer at the same time the choice to opt in or not without disturbing the other. And that is something that we really need to consider as an important value.
Joel.
I wanted to intervene on this point. Thank you, Michel, for bringing this. It's great to have competitions. It works only if everyone has the same opportunity, equal opportunity to make the choice. Because the risk is that those who can afford will make a choice, and those who cannot afford then will be left alone. So this equal opportunity for all is really important. In Switzerland we have that. It might not be the case in all countries probably. Yeah? And the other point, I can tell you one technology that will come. Michel knows what I will mention. Quantum computing is going to be the next big stuff. And I tell you, if we are not ready, it's going to be a disaster. So we need to really work on this readiness for this next transition. Will we have the time to do what the experiment that is proposed? Because the other way to produce the change is a crisis. Unfortunately, we have seen that again and again.
Well, and with this comment about time, is actually time that we wrap up. We reach the end of the session. I just wanted to add something very, very quick. The session discussion reminded me something that was mentioned by a great radical thinker, designer in the past century, Cedric Price. He said, technology is the answer, but what is the question? And we always need to ask, the question, and the question today we've seen many questions. Questions about trust, about engagement, about democracy, about dialogue, security, sustainability, of course. Could this help us make our cities more sustainable? Cities, after all, is where 70–80% of CO2 emissions happen. And then the three most important takeaways I got from the session, which is focusing on people, and people. And with that, please join me to thank with an applause our wonderful participants. And let's continue the conversation at WEF 2024.